In any economy, you have the buyers and you have the sellers. For example, in the real world, you have farmers, you have hungry people, and then you have the supermarket in the middle, taking a giant cut of the profits. What if I were to tell you a similar thing happens in everyone's favourite game, within a game, within a game? HypixelSkyblock. What if I told you that sometimes when you try to sell your hard-earned items, you aren't selling to a customer who really wants your dirt blocks, but instead, directly to a bot who will resell it on your behalf and keep the profits? Let's take a step back and have a look at how the economy came to be this way. What exactly is auction flipping? Well, auction flipping is not, sadly, doing a super cool backflip for the highest bidder, but is instead when you sell something for a higher price than you bought it for. Hypixel rolled out the auction house at the start of SkyBlock. However, this early on in the game, the only type of selling on the auction house that you can do were actual auctions. That's right, if you wanted to sell your collection of 500 fancy swords, you would have to list each one for a set time, and wait until that time was up before you could claim your 1,000 coins that someone bid because they didn't know how to get to the gold mine. On the topic of claiming, you should claim your place under 10k in our race to beat this subpar YouTuber who doesn't even care about his subscribers. Looking at the insane rate that you guys are subscribing, this might be your last chance to be under 10,000. Make sure you don't miss out. Anyway, the way that these auctions worked meant that if you wanted to buy a cheap item, everyone else also had the same chance to discover that exact same item and bid it out of your price range. Or maybe it even ended while you were asleep. Clearly, this was quite annoying, especially when people were looking to get rid of their items as quickly as possible so that they could upgrade to the next best gear. So, on May 19th, 2020, Hypixel added a new way to sell your items. Buy it now, or bin. When you list your item as a bin sale, you set a price that you want to sell it at, and a maximum auction time. That means if someone tries to buy your item straight away, they can. As a seller, if you wanted to get rid of items and get coins fast, you could simply list your items for cheaper and someone will buy it way faster since yours would be the best deal. This was a huge improvement, but it also meant there was a gap in the market. If previously, players were willing to pay 1 million coins for an item, but you were listing it for 800,000 coins to get rid of it faster, well, there's a free potential 200,000 coins just being thrown away. Enter the flippers. Auction flippers are fantastic for you as a seller trying to sell items quickly, and terrible for you as a buyer looking for good deals. Their number one goal is to buy your cheap items fast, list them higher, and then wait for a buyer willing to pay the right price to come along. As a buyer though, that meant that once again, all the cheap deals were gone. You had to hope you either got extremely lucky and managed to buy an item before a flipper did, or you had to spend the full price to one of the flippers and miss out on the potential savings. But most players didn't care. The flippers were putting real time into their flips. They had to know the market, what the price should be, that you were listing it below market price, and they also had to see your listing soon after you sold it, so that someone else didn't get to it. This was reasonably respectable, and soon became one of the easiest ways to make money in the game. Essentially, once you knew the prices, flipping takes very little work for your reward. It's like an investment. You simply invest some money into an item, wait for someone to buy it, and boom, your investment pays off. In the end, it turned into a 3-party system. The seller puts in the work to obtain and sell the item, the flipper puts in the work to know the market and where that item should really be priced at, and the buyer puts in the coins. Wait a second. Remember how I said you need to know the market to be a good flipper? What if you didn't? Enter the flipping sites. See, Hypixel provides an API for their auction data. An API is pretty much a way for other programs to interact with a system or read its data remotely. In SkyBlock, it meant that you could write a system to download all the data of the current auctions, and you could do that every minute, over hours and over days. With all of that data, you could start to figure out what things normally sell for, the median price, and with that, you can detect when auctions are cheaper than they should be. This gave rise to the first flipping tools. The first website of its kind was a site called HyAuctions, and if you've played SkyBlock, you've definitely heard of it. The site actually predates bin auctions, releasing in December 2019, so when bin auctions first arrived, they were straight on the scene. Now, the site was far from perfect, but it still dramatically lowered the skill level required for auction flipping. Rather than memorizing every single item, you just had to have some common sense and you could join in. HyAuctions was not the only site doing this. People built their own flipping sites with their own price calculations, trying to beat the other websites. Most of these were private. For example, a developer called Meyi made a flipping site for themselves in September 2020. And let me tell you, flipping was lucrative back then. Next, the first paid sites started appearing, where you had to pay with real money to access these sites. To these players, it was worth it. It was a hell of a lot cheaper than buying cookies or IRL trading, and a lot more respected in the community. One such paid site was made by a player called iCheppy. Remember this name, it's super important later. It was pretty late to the party, launching on the 3rd of January 2021, but it further still widened the prevalence of these sites. Another site, called CoffleNet, opened later still in May 2021. This time, it was another public site, and, like High Auctions, it tracked all auctions over time. But it was faster. See, there's another limitation I haven't mentioned till now. These sites were slow. Aside from the infamous High Auctions loading times taking multiple seconds, it's just not very fast to keep a website open all the time and copy-paste the view auction command into your chat. A lot of the time, if you were manually flipping auctions, you could beat the flippers, since you'd see the auction on your screen and be able to instantly buy it, whereas the flippers had to see it, tab out of Minecraft, select it, copy it, tab back into Minecraft, open chat, paste the command, and then finally buy it. Well, the smarter of you have probably already realised the obvious fix here. Brain implants? No. But what if we could somehow put the website flippers in-game? If we could cut out as many steps as Hypixel allows, maybe we could buy the auctions faster. Enter the mods. The first private flipping mods started popping up in January 2021, but they wouldn't start to enter the public eye until much later. One of these, called Jasmine, was actually also made by me. Remember, that's the person who made a private flipping site earlier. They'd moved on to better, faster things. Another early private mod was called Stonks. This was a flipper that started off as a Discord bot for finding exotics on auction, and was quickly adapted to work for pretty much any item sold. Eventually he too was struggling with being beaten by faster flippers, so a mod was the clear next step. Wait, let's quickly recap. How does the Hypixel Auctions API actually work? Well, it updates once a minute, and there were around 70 pages of auctions, with 1,000 auctions on each page. That's 70,000 auctions live in Hypixel at any one time, and some of these mods could process all of that in under 10 seconds after the API updates. Imagine if you, a manual flipper, tried to go through 70,000 auctions and check their prices. It just wouldn't be possible. These tools had a real advantage. And the mods themselves had a huge advantage over the websites. They pretty much worked like this. The mods continuously checked the Hypixel API for any new auctions, just like the sites, comparing them to existing price data to determine whether it's a flip or not. If it was, the mod would then send a message in your chat. You could then just click the text in chat and quickly buy the auction. This was much more efficient than the previous website flippers and saved so many steps. Plus, it seemed to be allowed by Hypixel, so there was no risk. But they couldn't stay hidden forever. Eventually someone would make a public mod, right? The date is the 25th of August, 2021. 7 whole months after the first private mods were popping up. Oh look, a new YouTube video. Oh dear. Earlier, I said that a player called iCheppy made a paid flipping site, and like the others, they didn't stop there. They made a video showcasing their flipping mod, called AOTF, Aspect of the Flipper. Now, the mod was nothing revolutionary. As I said, it was first showcased 7 months after the other mods, but that's not why this matters so much. The video gained a lot of attention. To date, it has over 80,000 views. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but considering the number of people who knew about mod flipping before this was closer to 100, this was wild. This video made people realize flipping with a mod is so much faster than flipping with a website, and people made their own mods, others sold them, and overall the competition grew by 100-fold in just a few weeks. The need for speed grew. I said before that these mods could check the whole 70,000 auctions on API in under 10 seconds, right? Well, they had to get faster now. That 10 seconds quickly shrunk, with tons of programming time and optimizations. Some of these mods were now able to check every single page of auctions against their pricing information in under a second. With this, the room for human error slowly started to narrow. Remember how before I said that anyone could flip as long as you had common sense? Well, it turns out that common sense takes time. When you're trying to compete with other mod users, you can't wait half a second for your brain to think about whether it's a good deal or not. Someone with more money they can afford to lose will have already bought it. That meant that the pricing algorithms these mods used got increasingly more complex, since the better you could guess the price, the faster your users could buy the items, and the more profit they made. With these mods operating like businesses, higher profit means more customers, and more money for their developers. Eventually, they got good enough at pricing that their users just didn't care anymore. At this stage, these mods were generating billions of coins per day combined for their users, and now that all required brain cells were removed, it was a game of reaction speed. Who would click the chat message first? Except, it's not just the chat message. After you opened an items buy menu, you had to move your mouse to the middle of the screen to actually buy the item, and again to the left to confirm your purchase. You think you'd be able to guess where this is going, but apparently not. I was just as surprised as you when it turned out that some of these flippers had resorted to using drawing tablets to buy the items faster. Yes, those drawing tablets. Auction flipping had turned into Minecraft Osu. With drawing tablets, you can click on the exact position of the buy and confirm buttons every time, with some people going as far as to mark it on the tablet with tape so they couldn't miss. The mods also implemented keybinds, so you could simply hold a key on your keyboard and the auction would open. As they kept adding more and more features like this, they were getting closer and closer to breaking the Hypixel rules. But it did require human interaction for every stage of the process, so it wasn't breaking every rule, right? Enter the macros. Yeah, you knew this was coming. When anything comes down to time, whether that be spending hours mining or buying auctions in mere milliseconds, you'd be sure to see the macros taking the piece of the pie. I do have to warn you, before we continue, doing anything we talk about from here on out will get you banned. It's not worth it, you won't even get to keep the coins. Back when this was first happening though, Hypixel hadn't yet caught on, and most of these users got away scot-free with their malicious actions. If you're blissfully unaware, a macro is basically a simple program that performs actions for you. Anything from clicking your mouse to moving your character, performing actions with little to no human interaction. Some of the simplest macros at the time would wait for a single button press from the user, and then instantly click the mouse where they expected the buy and confirm buttons to be. People could do this without any programming knowledge or skill. They just use any macro program that let them click a spot on the screen in a certain time. Problem was, they still had to wait for the user to realise there was an auction to buy. Fatal milliseconds where other, faster macroers could buy the auction first. In case you didn't know, a millisecond is a tiny unit of time, used to measure extremely fast things. 1 single second is 1000 milliseconds, and the average human reaction time is 250 milliseconds. When I'm saying a mere 250 milliseconds makes a difference between getting the flip or losing it, you know this stuff happened fast. The goal was to take away that human reaction time. Newer macros were designed as mods that you could install separately to the flipping mod itself, and it would automatically listen for the chat message, open the auction, and buy it, with zero human interaction required. Let me show you an example. Did you see that? They were buying these items in under 100 milliseconds flat, and most of that time was spent waiting for the GUI to finish loading from Hypixel before it could click buy and confirm. Well, at least these macros had to wait. Even though these public flipping mods were widespread by now, that didn't stop people from making and using their own mods. One such mod, we'll call it Mod F, had a special rule-breaking trick up its sleeve. It would, as most users called it, do a confirm skip. Once you'd hit buy, it would intercept Hypixel at the packet level and say, yep, I've clicked confirm, before the GUI could even show on your screen. Eventually, Mod F completely took out the GUIs and player interaction altogether. When it found an auction, it would ask Hypixel to view it, and before showing the buy GUI with the gold nugget, instantly respond with the click, and the same for the confirmation. That meant that people using Mod F could keep doing other things. Zealot farming, dragons, anything, as long as the mod could run the /view auction command. This would be quite easy to detect, if only Hypixel knew what was going on. As the macroing scene grew, legitimate players were forced out of the flipping game, and more macroers were the only people getting auctions. The authors of the flipping mods didn't like this. Legitimate players were a big portion of their user base, and less legit players using their mod meant less profit for them. So they tried to help. They added delays, fairness systems, to try and give their legitimate users an advantage, and to slow down the macros. This did work, but each mod could only add so many precautions and slowdowns before another mod that's not adding those would have such a large speed advantage that the legit mod got no auctions. As all of the flipping mods were limited to fetching auctions at the same rate, which is once a minute when the Hypixel API updates, any delay or speed penalty you added would hurt your mod's performance. For example, if you got the flips 100 milliseconds after the API refresh, and normal users took another 800 milliseconds after that to buy it, but the macros only need 50 milliseconds, you'd need to delay the macros by 750 milliseconds more to make it somewhat fair for your normal users. But that means that no one using your mod could buy the auctions until 900 milliseconds after the refresh. If another mod refreshed in 150 milliseconds, which is slower, but then allowed macros to buy the flips 50 milliseconds later, all of the auctions will be sold 200 milliseconds after refresh. It's like Black Friday, except you always lose. January 2022. The mods found an exploit. Or, I should say, some mods found an exploit. I'm not going to go into too much detail on how this works since it's still not been patched. But normally, Hypixel sends the new auctions to Cloudflare to reduce their network load. And then a few seconds later, everyone can see the new auctions. However, with this exploit, the mods could see the auctions update without waiting for Cloudflare, sometimes giving them up to a 2000 millisecond advantage over the other mods. A huge advantage! Using this trick, these mods had a lot more room to delay the macros, since no one else could even see the same flips until a whole 2 seconds later. Thankfully, this worked for a while, but the detection methods weren't perfect. If a macro waited for a super high profit flip, for example, a 1 billion coin Hyperion being sold for 1 million coins instead, and then macroed only that, the mods couldn't delay them since they didn't know the user was macroing until after they'd already bought the item. But it worked. Players and macroers were on pretty fair ground most of the time, and using a macro didn't really help you out. Well, in September 2021, just after the first mods were starting to take off, Hypixel admin Minikloon posted this tweet, asking their followers if there should be a 20-second grace period before someone could buy your auction. So if you accidentally listed a Hyperion for under 0.1% of its value, you'd still have time to cancel it before someone else could snipe it from you. This seemed like a great change. Just don't show anyone else that the auction exists until the time is up, and you'd have all that time to realise your mistake before it could even possibly be sold. The date is April 2022, and that change is finally rolling out. Except that wasn't exactly how it worked. After listing an auction before this change, you actually already did have a small grace period before it would show up on your auctions, roughly 5 seconds after creation. Now, however, you had a 20-second period, but that was before people could buy the auction. That didn't stop it showing up on your user page, the in-game auction house, or, most importantly, on the auctions API. Remember how those mods with a 2-second advantage could mitigate macros on almost all flips? Well, if the auction was in this grace period, if a macroer, or another mod entirely, found the auction before the grace period expired, the macroers could simply wait for the grace period to end, and then instantly perform the 2 clicks that bought the auction, before any human players had a chance. Since the API updates once a minute, that means a third of all listed auctions were made less than 20 seconds before the update. That's 1/3 of all flips, guaranteed to be won by macroers. The only flips that the human flippers could buy now were the first 2/3 of auctions, the ones that were listed more than 20 seconds before the API update. And yeah, you guessed it, there's something here I need to tell you about that too. We've covered manual flipping, website flipping, mod flipping, even macroing the mods. No! But there's one other category I haven't talked about, something that works completely differently to all these methods. Page flipping. The API had a huge limitation. It only updated once a minute. That means if any flips were listed right after the update, it wouldn't show up on the API until the next update, up to a whole 60 seconds later. This wasn't really an issue in the past. Any manual flipper going through the auction house wouldn't be able to cover every item in that time, especially considering there were 70,000 auctions to check through. But what if, instead of checking every auction, they just watched for new items of a certain type, let's say Hyperions, to be listed at a super low price? Well, they could simply open up the auction house, search for Hyperions, and wait. Well, not exactly. If you just stare at the auction house, nothing will change. The expiry dates on the items will count down, but it'll still be the same items regardless of how long you wait. To make these items update, or new items show, you had to make the whole page update, either by leaving and re-entering the auction house, or, as the name implies, visiting the next page and coming back. This is where the term page flipping comes from, both because you were flipping items, but also because you had to flip, like a book, to the next page and back. These page flippers, as we call the people doing this, would spend their time clicking back and forth between pages and checking the lowest priced item, which is normally the first item, matching their given filters to see if it's worth buying and reselling. While flips from the other methods happen pretty often, the chance that a flip for a specific item is going to appear is actually extremely low. This meant that these page flippers had to sit there for hours on end, clicking 2 buttons back and forth until a good deal appeared. If you ask me, one of the most boring things you could do in the whole of SkyBlock. And this is in a game where the admins want the best money making method for early game players to be holding 2 buttons down. So that's certainly saying something. And these players agreed. That's why almost none of these page flippers were legitimate players, and almost all were specially coded bots built to do this 24/7, flipping through a single item's auction listings and buying any deals it finds. While these page flippers were extremely efficient at finding and buying flips for the items it's searching for, it won't generate nearly as much profit as the fastest mods, searching the whole auction house. But it was a lot simpler and pretty easy to automate, and so as long as the auctions were listed, they were basically guaranteed profits since no one else could beat them to it. So now, this is starting to turn into a fully AFK-able auction flipper, but it was a pain for the people running these bots to go through and list these auctions once their inventory fills up. So of course, the next step was to automate that too. So now, they'd buy the items, list new auctions to sell the items, and collect the sold and expired auctions, which turned them into a money-making machine that they could leave running 24/7 while they went to school or work, and come back to a nice profit, all collected in the bot's purse. Wait, if they can run 1 and make a small amount of profit, can't they run 2 on different items and double their profits? How about 4, or 8, or even more? Yes, they could. The only problem though, is that they needed each of these accounts to always have enough coins in its purse to afford a flip, or to list anything they bought. And they'd need to collect the money from all these flip bots at some point. Now, even though Hypixel's detection of these bots was pretty much non-existent at the time, Hypixel's IRL trading detection was pretty damn good. For context, IRL trading is when you buy in-game content for real-life money, and so they'd monitor all trades which were extremely unfair to one party, or were clearly an attempt at transferring money unfairly. And, well, there's not really a way to get your money from all of these bots without some red flags being raised. This brings us to the next, and one of the final topics, Headless Clients. It should hopefully be clear to you by now that the biggest factor among all of this was speed. Whether that's the speed to check auctions for the manual flippers, the speed to copy-paste for the websites, or just the speed to click buy for the mods and the page flippers. It's not just human reaction time though that affects their speed. No, it turns out that Hypixel is actually xenophobic. Anyone who's not from the good old US of A is slowed down by Hypixel so they have less fun playing the game. No, I'm just kidding, Hypixel aren't xenophobic. Physics is. You see, in this universe we live in, everything has a speed limit. From your grandma's driving to the light from the sun, there's a maximum speed for everything in the universe. If you've ever heard of the sound barrier or the Concorde jets, they would travel faster than the speed of sound, creating a sonic boom behind them. That's because sound itself is also limited. It can't travel faster than the air particles that carry it. The same thing applies to light and to all information. The speed of light is the maximum speed that anything in the universe can travel at, whether that's a physical thing, like a photon, or an abstract concept, like gravity, or information. Nothing can go faster. So, let's pretend the Hypixel servers are in New York, and you live in London, England, just a short 3,500 mile trip across the Atlantic Ocean away. If you were to shine a laser directly at the servers, it would actually take a whole 18 milliseconds to get there. And once the servers receive that laser, they have to send their own laser back to let you know that they can see yours, which takes another 18 milliseconds to reach you, making your whole conversation take 36 milliseconds. We call this back and forth time latency, and it's what people mean when they talk about their ping to a server, how long it takes their internet signals to reach the server and come back. This is also called the round trip time, since the information needs to perform a round trip. Well, that's only if the light had nothing in its way to make it bounce another direction. In reality, your internet signals are sent through copper wire and fiber optic cables, in which light and electrons only travel at 2/3 the speed of light in a vacuum. So that 36 millisecond journey would be more like 48 milliseconds, and that's even before we consider inefficiencies, like the undersea cables not being a direct path between the server and the sender, or the fact that we have to repeat the signal so it doesn't fade away, and any routing algorithm to figure out which way it needs to go. In reality, you're looking at a time closer to 70 or 80 milliseconds. An 80 millisecond delay in buying their SkyBlock items is a huge hit to these cheaters. Even worse, it's not just one buy signal they need to send. They have to ask to view the auction, wait for the view to be received, buy the auction, wait for the confirm screen to be sent, and then finally confirm the auction. That's 5 steps to purchase an auction. At 80 milliseconds a step, that'd be almost 400 milliseconds. Remember how I said some macroers could buy the auctions in less than 50 milliseconds? Yeah, a 400 millisecond delay means you get absolutely nothing. This also applies if you don't live an ocean away. Every mile of distance between you and the servers adds up to 5 times the time, so the people living next door to the servers would always have an advantage. So, the cheaters came up with a new solution. They'd all move to Chicago. Wait, no, most of them live in their mum's basement. That's not really feasible. Okay, well, how about they just ran their Minecraft clients in Chicago and had their cheat software buy the auctions for them? That's exactly what they did. The cheaters would buy their own servers closer to Hypixel servers and run Minecraft there, cutting out sometimes hundreds of milliseconds of delay, all for a few extra SkyBlock coins. You can start to see how this is getting expensive now. They didn't just have to pay real money for the flipping software and their cheats alone, they now also had to rent a server every month. Now, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but Minecraft likes to show things on the screen. For example, the blocks around you, the main menu, or even the auction house itself. Mod F cut down on some of this, hiding the buy and confirm GUIs from you so you didn't have to wait for them to load. But this is different. Minecraft actually needs some form of graphics processor to run, and most of these servers didn't have them. Plus, even if they did manage to get graphics working on these servers, they were significantly underpowered, and lower frame rates means slower purchase times. This is where the term headless comes in. No, I'm not just talking about Henry VIII's wives or the French Revolution. The head here refers to the graphics and images shown on screen, the player's ability to view and interact with the game. The programs that these players had written or bought didn't actually need to interact with the screen anymore. They used a third-party Minecraft client with no GUI, which meant all they had to do was listen for the packets sent by Hypixel and send back the right answers. This was a lot faster than actually processing, displaying, and interpreting the GUI itself. Of course, at this point, regular players had no chance of ever buying a bed flip, nor any of the flips that a paid flipper was watching. But still, they might have had a chance on the rest of the flips if the flip mod they used tried to give them advantage over the macroers. The humans trying to make this profit could still do it, right? They could. And they did. Even though their profits had dropped from 100 million coins per hour to 30 million coins per hour in some cases, it was still profit, and you only had to pay attention to it for the first couple seconds of each minute, so for the rest of the minute you could actually farm, do slayers, or anything else with your time, as long as it didn't require 100% attention. So, the flippers persisted on, making their decent pocket change, buying and selling when they could. But since the mods were paid and the competition was at an all-time high, eventually it became less and less worth it, which did help to reduce the competition, but greatly limited the variety of flippers. Only the richest players in real life could really afford to use these paid services anymore. December 29th, 2022. With a pretty low number of humans left in the game, flipping was becoming a dying breed of money making. Everything changed, however, when a player solved one big issue. Remember how I said that people couldn't or didn't want to run many page flippers since it was a huge hassle and there was a high risk of a ban for IRL trading? Well, there's a solution to that, and it's an interesting one. How about, instead of having these accounts flip through auction pages and buy the auctions, they just find the auctions and send it back to their main account, where they can flip it before anyone else and collect all the money in one place. This is where the term pre-API comes from, as it worked almost exactly like the mod flippers, except the auctions came from in-game headless bots, rather than from using the official API. This method eventually wiped out pretty much all legit players, as if there's a new item making profit, the bot master, who we'll call player R, could simply spin up a new account targeting those items. Everyone else stood no chance. As with everything though, there is a huge trade-off to make here too. This quickly got expensive. Even if he was illegally buying stolen Minecraft accounts, the costs add up as he was going through dozens and dozens of accounts. In addition, Hypixel could figure out that these accounts were botting auctions and start issuing bans, meaning he had to buy even more accounts still. They couldn't just be any account though. They had to be unbanned on Hypixel, and they have to have played SkyBlock too, so that they had stats. He would buy cookies on these accounts, sell the bits for profit, and run the /AH command from his island so that admins didn't find the bots sat in a hub all day. At one point, his bot army had over 100 accounts online simultaneously, fetching and sending auctions to his server. He didn't actually just do this for the SkyBlock coins though. He sold this data to the mods themselves so that they could offer this service on his behalf to their existing customer base. This netted him a decent profit, but considering the accounts and servers he had to buy and rent, it wasn't as large as you might think. This was it though. There was no chance of any mods or players using legit methods to be able to compete with this service. The regular API macros and cheaters could buy all the bed flips, and the pre-API users could buy, well, everything else. This brings us now to the present day. What's the state of flipping now? Well, it's not all doom and gloom. Hypixel finally caught on. They've issued mass ban waves for a bunch of cheaters, and they've added some fantastic detection for the page flippers and pre-API bots in the last few months. So, will flipping ever go back to what it used to be? Well, probably not. Now that these methods have been developed and are in the public eye, there's always going to be someone flipping with a website, a Discord bot, or with a mod to tell them auction prices and find the flips faster than a human brain can. Some popular SkyBlock mods, such as NEU, added precautions that alert you if you're trying to list an item for way under Elbin, so there's a lot less snipeable auctions around, and overall a lot less profit available. Subscribe!